extremely privileged today. I have a wonderful panel joining me this morning. I have Amit Jhunjhunwala, who's the CFO of Accel in India. I have Dilip Gopinath, who's a leader for tech and startups in HSBC. I have Pankaj Shroff, who's the CFO of Porter. I have Ranjit, who's leading the investment banking practice on the tech and startup sides for Ambit, and I have Ramesh, who joins us from CoinSwitch. He's the CFO there, and I also have Vikas with me. Vikas is the group CFO for Housing, PropTiger, and Makaan.com. And I have Vivek, who comes in from a consumer mobility Rapido point of view. He's the CFO with Rapido. So on that note, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this panel. If I may sort of begin with, asking a very broad, open-ended question to all of you. What's your first reactions on the budget? Any initial thoughts? Amit, you want to go first on this?
Yeah, thanks, Ritesh. Thanks for having me. I think there were a lot of expectation. Like no budget is a happy budget because there is always like some hits and misses, as we call it. And ultimately, the pool of money with the government is limited, and if they have to give happiness to someone, it has to come from some other pocket, right? So and that ends up happening. But at a broader side, if we look at it, this budget continues the theme from the older budgets, and where there is a push towards spending on infrastructure, agriculture, and so on and so forth, to make countries self-reliant and really ultimately passing a lot of money to the people through this, and accordingly increasing the consumption, right? Specifically, startup and investors, I think they are more negative than positive to really talk about, but because in the last year, budget 2022, when there was an expert committee formed as a expert panel under the leadership of Mr. Damodaran, there was a lot of hope that things will change, and there were a lot of lots of proposals, recommendations which were made by the committee, but we didn't see those mentioned in the budget. Like, so maybe we'll have to wait for 2025 to see some light there. Because next year is anyways more like an interim budget, or maybe we'll have to wait for 18 months because that's when the next budget gets presented. If you look at some of the things which has changed more on the negative side, is really the angel tax for even non-resident investors. I think that will create a lot more challenge for the startup in terms of taking away their bandwidth to kind of explain how the fair valuation was determined, why it should not be taxed. And I think we have seen how it has worked with a resident investor itself, and for foreign capital is much larger in proportion. So the problem is going to compound there, right? Some of the things like maybe a long-standing ask like ESOP taxation at the time of exit has not been addressed. So that's something everyone was looking for. Right. Some of the positive change, if you see, reduction of surcharge for the highest income group on the ultra HNI is something which will HNI ultra HNI will help because people were worried about that 42% tax rate, and it used to be a headline everywhere. Now it is below 40, closer to 39. So I think it will give some happiness. But a lot of things have been taken away from the HNIs, be it in terms of capital gain exemption on investment in real estate property, or when it comes to the taxation around the LIC or insurance premium, which are beyond a particular threshold. So the receipt of those considerations will be taxable now, right? So I think everyone is a little happy, but more unhappy at this point in time. Maybe once we see finer detail and there are final changes, or there may be something which comes handy and maybe more cheerful.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think quite a few in that sense on hits and misses. Ranjit, your thought on initial thoughts on the budget? You want to sort of weigh in?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So look, I think the budget basically underscored the government's vision for Amrit Kal, which essentially envisages India to be a technology-driven and more sort of knowledge-based economy. And trying to achieve this mission by relying on 7 key pillars focused on inclusive and prosperous growth, right? I think what stood out for me in the budget was definitely the push on infrastructure. Obviously, the idea has been for the government to kind of provide a cushion in this particular year where there may be some external events sort of out there. But I think, that commitment sort of came out in the significant growth from last few years, right? And, roughly about $150 billion of the debt exposure and probably $14 billion and $175 billion of total exposure, right? This essentially has a cascading and second order effects on various industries, right, across manufacturing, logistics, financing, etc., etc. And also it has a cascading effect on private investments, right? And I think to some extent it flows down to startups a little later in the value chain, but it does over a period of time. So I see this as kind of a welcome move. As Amit was also mentioning, in terms of making India sort of a more digital society, saw a lot of measures and initiatives on that front. I think, be it across agriculture, be it across, sort of increased reliance on digital services, be it across, sort of financial network platform, and a lot of these initiatives which kind of come together to provide the guardrails on which a society and businesses are built, right? And I think if you look at the last 5 years of startups which have been built, a lot of at least financial services startups or consumer businesses rely on these guardrails for their business. So I see this as a commitment, strong commitment to make our society, the infrastructure, digital infrastructure framework more stronger. So that kind of bodes well for businesses, etc. Thirdly, I think inclusive growth has been a cornerstone of this budget and previous budgets as well. Obviously, a lot of layers to it, but increased push to agri is one. But more importantly, I think when we look at MSMEs, they are the lifeblood of our industry. There the increased outlay on the CGTMSA scheme of roughly about $1 billion of extra corpus will probably have a multiplier effect on the amount that can be lent to MSMEs on a collateral-free basis, right? And this today, providing collateral-free loans is an important sort of aspect. It's a large problem statement with the MSMEs that few startups are also trying to advise, right? So I hope that this kind of provides further support, in that endeavor. On the taxation front, I think it was a mixed bag. So there were a few hits and misses. So probably I think there are a lot of nuances, and I think eventually answer will emerge in the fine print. But overall, to sum it up, a lot of sort of initiatives which will have medium to long-term impact. On startups, particularly, nothing very, very hard-hitting or big bang in nature, but I'll say that some of these are more foundational in concept.
Sure. And Dilip, just quickly sort of bringing you in on this, I know you're also on the Startup 20, the G20 delegation, and you've been working closely with startups for many years now. Any initial response to the budget, especially on the startup front?
Thanks, Ritesh. So from a startup perspective, as Amit and Ranjit mentioned, nothing big bang as such, but probably the way I would see it is you bundle startup and SMEs together. So the increased credit guarantee scheme for SME lending, I think a lot of startups are taking advantage of. And mid of last year, we also saw that there is a separate credit guarantee for startups who are registered under DPIIT, and a lot of banks have started enrolling themselves as member lending institutions to fund to startups specifically. And coming to the Startup 20, so I was part of the Finance Council over there, and some of the objectives that we are trying to solve within the G20 countries is one, access to capital. Now, we see that startups, especially early stage startups, are not able to showcase the investment profile to a larger pool of capital providers. So one objective of the council was to how do you encourage more capital coming in from different countries, especially within the G20. And as Amit said, it's been a little bit of a dampener with the angel tax and NRIs being included in it. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out from that perspective. The second was to encourage startup as a lending asset class for banks to do it. So that's something which is covered. under the budget. And the final thing is share best practices and pitching opportunities across the G20 nations. So over there, I think the digital infrastructure that we as a country is putting up, including the agriculture has been credited as a digital public good, and the national data governance policy will benefit for startups to do more on the tech stack that we already built up. So I think just to sum it up, and there are positives, but yeah, from a capital inflow perspective, there could be a little bit of a dampener, especially when you're trying to get people access to capital across a lot more capital providers.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think most of us seem to carry that view that it's the step in the right direction, but could have been a little bit more carefully taken. But that said, Vikas, I'll sort of quickly get you in on this. We all spoke of infrastructure. You've been in the in the real estate space for now close to 10 years or slightly over 10 years now. How was your read? What's your read on the budget? And I want to sort of particularly ask you: do you think this limitation for capital gain redeployment in buying new houses restricted to 10 crores? Do you think that's going to have some kind of a shadow on the real estate industry?
No, thanks, Ritesh. And I think I also have a very similar view, which most of the panelists carry here. But I also agree with what Ranjit mentioned, that this is a bit of a foundation setting stone type of a budget, where a lot of actions have been taken, which will help different industries and in fact our tech startup ecosystem a lot. But there are no specific big push which was needed, like something like ESOP taxation, which has been there in demand for quite some time. The government could have addressed it, and budget is the right time to address ESOP related taxation issues, and especially this angel tax issue, which is again cropping up in this budget, could be tricky. But if I talk about, to answer your specific question on infrastructure, I think this has been going very well for the last few years, and I think government's focus in building infrastructure is in the right direction, because for a country like India, which is now the most populous country across the world, our infrastructure is lagging significantly, and it needs a lot of investment. And that investment will not only going to help real estate sector, which for sure will have a positive impact on real estate sector, and we've started seeing the green shoots of that in the last year and a half, where real estate has started recovering from the downturn of almost 4-5 years, or 6 years rather. So real estate has a very positive outlook, I would say, and this kind of an infra investment will further boost it. But I think this will also have a spiral effect on many other industries, whether it is automobile, a lot of startups who are focusing a lot on logistics. Logistics anyways is considered as a backbone of our retail sector, or our a lot of other industries. GST has helped it, but infra will going to further boost it. So I think from that perspective, this is positive. And in fact, if we talk about some of the other foundational moves, whether it is setting up AI labs, or data privacy laws, or agri-tech push, or push for electronic vehicles and related sectors, I think these are all in the right direction. Answering your second question specifically, whether capping the limit of 10 crore for capital gain deployment or redeployment will going to have any impact on real estate, I don't think so, Ritesh, because the large volumes which moves or which decides the velocity or the growth in the real estate sector is still in the price bracket of 50 lakhs to 2.5 to 3 crores. And I think that is where the government needs to focus a lot. So that change, yes, will going to impact. On the one side, we've made the ultra HNI or HNIs happy by reducing surcharge a little bit. But on this side, this may not be a very happy situation for ultra HNIs. And from a real estate perspective, like we are talking about other big bang pushes, I think real estate sector is also expecting for a couple of big push from the government side. One is a single window clearance, which is a very long ask. from the government. This will not only reduce the litigation in the sector, but also improve the consumer confidence a lot, because right now, what impacts when a customer is buying a property, he doesn't know whether it is clear from all type of litigations, it has all type of approvals and so on and so forth. That is something which will be a big confidence builder. Second, I think from a digital, because the government is focused on digital infrastructure for various industry, real estate, which contributes 8% of GDP, I think the government should think of how the digital infrastructure can be uplifted for real estate, like digitization of title records. Uh, that again will gonna help increasing the volume of buying and selling in real estate a lot. So these are a few things, but I agree. It's there are some hits, but there are misses as well.
Sure. I mean, on that note, because you spoke of infrastructure, logistics being our backbone, I have Vivek and Pankaj with me, who sort of, on one side, consumers, both side consumers, but largely the infra logistics play. Pankaj, do you want to go first? Let us, talk to us about what your thoughts are on some of this.
Thank you so much, Ritesh, for this platform. And I would like to just mention a few points, in addition to what other panelists have already mentioned. Do not want to, for the sake of repetition. So I think the key takeaway for the logistics industry, particularly from the budget, was the push on the investments in the railways, as well as investments towards urbanization. While India is a country which lives in the villages, but there is massive urbanization also, which is happening similar pace, right? We are already aware of the traffic woes that exist in our cities, right, in the larger cities. So some of these things would definitely go and decongest the cities and also make better infrastructure available for everyone to have better living. And of course, the other points which have been mentioned for startups. One of the other things that I found was friendlier for the startup environment and for the industry in general is moving towards sowing the seeds for common KYC documents in the form of digital lockers and all, right. So once that gets implemented, I think a lot of paperwork could reduce, right, and KYC should be much simpler. For sure, the tech environment is getting better every time. On the personal taxation front, again, given there is clear indication from the FM that the new regime will be the default regime, in which case I think that government has a very good opportunity to channel the savings that it has been doing all this along, right? So through ATC, it has been able to build up a huge retirement corpus and stuff. But there is no such incentive in the new regime for a personal income taxpayer for an individual to continue with. Not sure which way this is heading and how this will impact. But yeah, given the government generally is concerned towards the pension liabilities and retirement savings and all, maybe this is not an opportunity which it wants to do. Yeah, that's it from my side.
No, I think on the personal income tax, we were doing some calculations. If you sort of look at it, despite the rate rationalizations in the new regime, the old regime somehow seems to be more attractive, because a large part of the difference is above 15 lakhs, 30% versus a slightly higher benefit that's available to you otherwise. But I guess, she made it clear that the new tax regime is a default one unless you want to go back to the old. But let's see on that. Vivek, what's your thought on this?
So first of all, thanks, Ritesh, for this opportunity. So just to start with the point on new regime versus old regime. See, FM is continuously pushing for the new regime, which is basically pushing for more spends, fueling the economy as such. No longer the focus is on investment or investment for future and etc. Spends and current spends, that's the entire focus from the FM side of it. And coming back to the question on the infrastructure side, if you look at the last budget, PM Gati Shakti was the major narrative in the previous budget, and major focus was on all the infrastructure side of it. Current one do not talk about any of those big bang investment assets. Somewhere I believe the government is focusing on putting more outlays on the existing initiatives rather than bringing new initiatives, and that's where I look at it. It's good that railway is getting the highest outlay, And maybe startups can focus on tying up with railways and figuring out on more of a public-private partnerships and improving on that sector. Similarly, on the logistics side also, there is a good opportunity to invest. But apart from this, there's not much of a big bang from an overall infrastructure side of it. One key thing is urbanization is something that's been pushed upon. Combined with the urbanization, there is a tourism focus also is there. So this will provide opportunity to grow in tier 2, tier 3 or tier 4 cities or rest of the tier cities. So that's again a good opportunity for the startups to start looking at those avenues. So that's where I see it as such. Apart from the physical infrastructure, from a digital infrastructure, though there are talks about simplification of KYCs or focus on DigiLocker services, one thing that I was disappointed is there is no further investment on the digital payment ecosystem. So that is still at 1,500 crores of a subsidy, which means the banks or the NPCA may not be able to invest more on that infrastructure. Either the consumers have to bear that cost. So that infrastructure, I was hoping that there could be some investment coming from that.
No, you're right. I think some bits they could have done a little bit more. But you spoke of digital infrastructure, and there has been quite a bit that has happened on the virtual digital assets and the online gaming space. On that note, Ramesh, I want to sort of bring you in your reactions to what the budget did, criminalizing non-withholding of taxes, to sort of carving out two separate regimes for online gaming. Your thoughts on this, Ramesh?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So overall, I'll tell on the positive sides of the startups where the focus is, right? It's clearly coming on agri-tech in terms of accelerated startup funds. We have seen Center of Excellence getting developed for AI in India, right? They're going to figure out top educational institutes for AI. The miss here is they could have done similarly for blockchain as well. While Vikas mentioned saying that there's an urgent need of digitization of land records, what better than having it on blockchain, right? Because it's non-fungible, decentralized, a lot more secure. Right? Having COEs around blockchain would have been extremely important. I think that's a big area miss where the hit is definitely on AI. We have seen what GPT can do, and if we can develop a lot more on those sectors, right? I met somebody yesterday who's working on AI on cancer research and those things. So fantastic initiative, innovations happening across on AI side. I think that it's definitely a big boost. KYC, everybody has spoken about. I think one sector which is lab-grown diamonds, again, significant for custom duties now zero. There is L&D grant, the R&D grant is given to IITs on this. I think it's definitely a big disruption happening in this category, or at least in this segment. 100 lab and 5G technology, of course, is going to change the digital infrastructure. On the misses side, I think VDA is completely missed. I was leading the entire Bharat Web3 Council in terms of the entire industry body. I had a presentation pre-budget as well, right? In terms of clearly articulated what the need states are, how are we looking at Web3 5 years down the line across the world, right? We are in this equal footing. It's new technology for India, new for the world. And if we could take a lead at this moment, then we kind of become the technology leader in the new world, right? In the Web3 world. Unfortunately, that's not fully considered, right? And however, there were instances of Indian residents going abroad, right? International exchanges not to circumvent the TDS route. At least they kind of plugged that loophole. So I think the budget was more about figuring out where the loopholes are, and then putting out those rather than incentivizing on growing anything. So it was more a defensive plugging budget versus an incentivizing and growing budget, right? Startups basically have growth mindset. So the moment you don't see anything with a growth mindset resonated back to you, then you kind of feel there are some misses around it. But yeah, on the gaming side, spoke to a few friends who are CFOs in gaming industry. They are more relieved from where it is in terms of clarity and certainty of net winnings. It has to be TDS as per withdrawals or end of the year. So it's more like a relief than an euphoria saying that, yeah, it's great. So on the gaming side, at least there's a lot more clarity. There's differentiation between game of skill and those things, which we have seen last year has been plagued with multiple issues, right? In terms of big, in thousands of crores of notices coming to some of the gaming companies. And or at least those pieces will now get sorted. So yeah, overall, it's a mixed bag. A lot to be seen in the long-term growth perspective.
Sure. I think, one of the other aspects also that, we've all been dealing with is the government's response to newer businesses, right? And we've been seeing very often post facto negative response, especially from regulators like RBI. On certain new age business models, and there seems to be that bit of catching up that the government has to always do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so Ramesh, what's your thought on that? Because even in your space today, there continues to be lack of clarity, right? We don't know really what's going to happen next.
I give you both the sides. One is, see, any technology innovation will come first and regulation will catch up in general, right? But if you look at the countries, there is a lot of countries now have done that kind of catch up. So even on the catch up side, are you an early adopter, or are you going to follow all the early adopters and the innovation, those things? Are you setting the tone or just following it up, right? So in technology as well, we have seen instances in 2000, there was a dot-com bust. All the bad actors typically come first because they are kind of early adopters of all the technology, and the good use cases follow through. The role of regulation then becomes, how do you kind of address the bad actors but have the positive flywheel going into the good use cases, rather than saying, no, I don't think this is bad, and just shutting ourselves out, right? So I think at the moment it's more about I don't need it, or penalize significantly, than saying that, okay, we understand there will be bad actors because of technology. How do we limit those? How do we put checks and balances around those, yet have a sandbox kind of an approach where you do innovation around those areas and let those grow, and you become the leader in that space over a period of time, right? So see, in India was typically IT services mindset, the engineering mindset again was more services led. But if you look at startup world, it's more product led, right? So the thinking has evolved from, it was rightly so in services in those years, but now it's evolved where a lot of my family members, new age generation, want to do product led thinking, right? And I think that is where that this regulation and innovation has to come together. So yeah, it's lacking a bit at the moment, but hopefully going forward. G20 is another initiative where at least crypto and blockchain is part of those G20 initiatives. Hopefully with India's initiative, and let's see if there is some work happening post the OECD report which has come out.
Yeah. No, I agree. And Vivek, I sort of want to bring you in on this because I know even where you are today, though the industry has been around for a while, but there is still some confusion around, whether or not certain activities are permitted. What's your thought? Any response to what Ramesh said?
Ritesh, if you look at it, generally the approach of the government as such is, when we try to have something, a physical process getting digitized, the government is catching up on those processes as such. So that's why the regulatory is very much welcoming. But when something is new category as such is introduced, it takes time for the government. Industry such as us, it's not just the central government, it is also the state government should also understand and appreciate what we are trying to do. So it depends on a lot of people. That being said, there are other aspects. So now within the ministries also, each ministries have their different catch up on the regulatory piece. Maybe finances are ahead of the things, and or the commerce or the other ministries are still evaluating on the process. So these are the challenges. Typically, basically impacts the scalability across India as such. But having said that, government is trying to do so on a lot of aspects. Say, for example, ONDC as an example. This is a very good initiative from the government side of it. They are trying to adapt to what has been already established by Flipkart or Amazon or others in the same space, and bringing up good initiatives on those side of it. So my take is, yes, government has to look at it, and government typically the way they look upon is amending the existing provisions. I don't think no longer amending will help. Basically, revisiting the entire law will be the best approach. Somewhere that is missing. They did with GST, there were few challenges in that. So, but having said, they should revisit most of the laws as such. So that's the way forward for us.
No, I think we generally tend to agree to what both of you are saying. At least the good part is the current government is willing to listen and sort of take feedback to curate regulatory policies. There has been that bit of acceptance, at least, that we are seeing. But sort of, if I was to, turn the page now, and we spoke about the budget quite a bit, there is that overarching, framework that the budget again lays down in terms of the technology push, in terms of the data push, in terms of encouraging entrepreneurship. Sort of, I think if you were to sort of naturally progress into it, the question is, how do startups generally, as a section as a large section of our country today, how do you think this year 2023 should play? We are hearing all kinds of early news, from layoffs to funding winters to sort of complex issues around the startup ecosystem. Any quick thoughts, Amit? I'd love to begin with you. If you have some thoughts around the year ahead for startups and what it should look like.
That's a tough one. Actually, you put me on the spot, but yeah, I think. See, 2021 was an abruption. Everyone knows about it, and everyone feels the same, right? There was a lot of money which was printed, and it was finding its ways to various asset classes, right? The interest rates were so low that people were ready to experiment and really generate that alpha, and that included investing in risky assets like be it VDA or be it alternatives, right? Alternatives comes with a very high risk profile, and that's where the money pool which is available to invest is limited. But given the interest rate scenario, things changed. A lot of money came into maybe our hand to really invest onward, right? So I think there was a push, there was a competition, there was many companies getting funded at a very early stage. There were rounds which are happening like 2x 3x in less than 3 months, 6 months, right? So that is not going to happen. So that's the only thing which has changed. And when that happens, you are with flush of cash, and you really ultimately end up doing a lot of planning, a lot of growth, a lot of things. Like just to step back, it's not only valuations, it was also the way online businesses were behaving, because of the entire COVID scenario was very different, right? So India shops offline, and that is true, and we can really see that after the COVID, right? So there were a lot of investments which are happening on digital side to say that everyone will continue to shop online, or continue to study online, or continue to do various things online even after COVID settles in. But that's not the case. People are back to offline, right? People are dining out. People are in the entertainment. All the new movies are coming up. There is enough footfall in the shopping malls. People are not getting shop space in the malls, right? So if that is the scenario, I think there is some bit of correction on that side, because what you thought will be the growth for 2020 and 2023 is not really happening, and that is where there has been some correction. People are pulling back. They are cutting people who were hired, assuming certain growths, right? And then we all know, right, that the money has also become costlier, and things have changed. It's not as easy as it was. So that's where we are. So I think the advice for the last 6 months has been to conserve cash, increase runway, look for alternative capital. I think that will continue. There is enough dry powder available, and I'm sure a lot of reports are available which suggest like how much money is available with larger VCP ecosystem, which is waiting to be deployed. So there is money for good asset class. I think now companies have to show that real steady businesses and profitable businesses, or a path to profitability, because investors will look for exit. Capital markets are becoming tough. So I think overall things have completely changed between what it was in 2021, and 2023 is going to be a little more challenging, and we will have uncertainty continuing for some more time.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, India is an offline country. And it did take Pathan to bring us back to movie theaters after all. And on that note, Ranjit, I want to ask you, do you see a Pathan for the startups which will bring Amit and his friends in the industry back into putting money very soon? What's your read on this climate right now?
Yeah, look, I think so, Ritesh. I think, as Amit said, look, a lot of investment happens in cycles, right? And H2 of 2020 to H1 of 2022 was perhaps when the cycle sort of peaked, right? And then I think there has been some gradual sobering of the cycle, and valuation multiples, and investment actually follows valuation multiples to some extent, right? Because the better it is in some of those regards, I think more companies want to raise, etc. So I think that is overall state of macro. Having said that, there is a lot of layers and nuances to it, right? I think there are particular kind of transactions which have come down. For example, I think the early stage investment ecosystem remains very vibrant, right? And perhaps more the impact has been felt in some other segments of the market. There are a few subsectors which are sort of more resilient, have higher profit pools than others, which are probably demonstrating that strength, and few which probably have delayed monetization, etc. May have taken a slightly bigger hit. So within this macro, sort of backdrop, there are a lot of layers. There is always going to be a very, very strong demand for companies which are demonstrating good growth, unit economics, large operating in large markets, and led by foundational management teams. I think that core fundamental hasn't changed. There is a lot of interest from investors to invest in companies such as these. I think probably it's about timing these external fundraisers in the market. The existing investors continue to support their companies, right? And we see a lot of bridge rounds, etc., happening where companies feel that it might be more appropriate to go out to external universe 3-6 months down the line. We also see a lot of consolidation themes play out in the market. For example, where more established conglomerates or large digital conglomerates are actually acquiring capabilities in different niches. They're actually acquiring companies where there are synergies, and probably sometimes acquiring to have higher market share, right? So consolidation is a theme that we see at least play out in a few subsectors of the overall landscape, right? Now, in terms of investors, obviously, as counterintuitive as it sounds, we are seeing a lot of first-time investors into the market. These are, probably not the, most well-established institutional PVCs, but a lot of other pools of capital which are coming to invest in deals, both domestic and international. So that's quite interesting. The other, sort of consequence of this rationalization which has happened is that a lot of companies are kind of getting a bit leaner, developing more sort of capital efficient models, are kind of gearing up to a more sort of steady state normal, right? And when this happens, and when these companies sort of come out in the market to raise funds, I think there'll be very, very strong interest from investors because they would have actually demonstrated that resilience built around more sort of modes in the business, right? So in terms of timing, look, I think probably progressively each quarter is going to be more stronger in this year. We have obviously seen the worst, which was probably Q3, Q4 of last CY. Things are progressively getting better, and I think from a market perspective, from startup perspective, the market is very, very deep, and it's a lot of activity happening in various pockets of the market.
Very interesting, Ranjit. I mean, I'm glad you said, at least we hope the worst is behind us. So that's quite reassuring, I'm sure, for all of us here. But on that note, Dilip, I just want to sort of also bring you in. As a banker to multiple startups, you're also lending in the startup ecosystem now quite actively. How do you see the debt market play out vis-a-vis startups? Do you expect more aggressive debt, or do you expect the debt flow to sort of cool down a little bit? What's your thought?
And I think one conversation that I had with a Sunicon company yesterday actually sums it up. So this company was growing at almost 100%. But the CFO told me that he's okay with a 10-20% growth, but he wants to bring down the burn from a $2-3 million to $1 million or even lesser than that. So that really sums up the attitude of startup companies today. And that's what a debt provider would look at, right? So as HSBC, we also see a lot of interest in private credit in the market, and these are investors based out of Asia Pacific, where they want to invest in private credit, but they will typically look at companies who are on an EBITDA positive trajectory. So instead of dilutive capital, and today if you go to in fact, if you ask Amit, they will really ask for down round valuations, and we have seen very large unicorns going, agreeing to a down round valuation going. So I think private credit is going to go up, but you need to show them the path to profitability. Banks like HSBC, and we've been an active participant in lending to startups. We are actually thinking of doing more granular lending, smaller ticket sizes to early stage names also, using data as one of the mechanisms to lend to them. And we've seen success in the last 6-8 months, though I agree that the worst it was in Q3 of last year, Q2 or Q3. But we were still continuing to lend out to companies which had strong fundamental business model, good founders, and as lenders we continue to look at that part more than anything else. And obviously, if I see that there is no dearth of demand, and if you really have to keep on spending to acquire new clients, as we say the CAC, then we say it's not a model that is arrived. So these are things that we try and stay away from. But I think as a bank, we are quite positive on the tech space. Probably another quarter or two more of certain amount of uncertainty will be there. Because at the end of the day, every investor will try to just discount it, right? It's just a function of discounting. So today, if you're discounting your future cash flows at 5-6%, then you need really value for the buck that you're putting on the table. So from that perspective, you will see a little more uncertainty. But the future is, I would say, for the next medium-term future, it is still bright. And we are seeing startups realize the fact that, okay, you have to be a leaner, meaner, and then probably grow at a 30-40% and continue to ensure that your burn really comes down.
Yeah. No, I think between the three of you, the common denominator seems to be that qualitative growth, cash protection, EBITDA positivity, and I think that's the three themes that clearly emerge from this discussion. And I'll sort of, Vikas, I'd love to sort of bring you in on this. You've been a startup funded by VCP investors, and then transitioned into being a part of a large global group. What's your journey been like? Do you see any? We'd love to hear your advice on how people should respond to the current environment.
No, thanks, Ritesh. Before there were very interesting conversations going on, so I have a couple of points to make. Sorry, not answering your questions, but a few thoughts on some of the issues which was discussed by our other panelists on that what the government should have done versus a mismatch between what industry expects and what government is doing. I think there a lot more industry participation needs to be there in policy making, in legislations, and so on and so forth. I think what we've seen in the last decade or so, right now the industry has a seat on the table as a consultant, but I think that needs to change from a consultant to a permanent seat on the table, where you have a lot more say in policy making thing, and that'll solve a lot of issues which was highlighted by Ramesh, that from policy making perspective, especially for new age industries, it'll always be lagging, but how behind you are in comparison with the globe, that's something can be bridged if we have a permanent seat on the table. Coming to the startup piece, I think very interesting times we've seen between 2021 to now just entered 2023. I think it was a kind of a roller coaster ride, and we've seen these cycles in the past. I think it gives us a sense that human memory is very short. In 2000, when .com burst happened, people said, "Oh, now people will not going to do those mistakes again, then these things keep on coming back. And it's not wrong to some extent, because we're trying to do something very disruptive, trying to create markets, new markets, and which we've seen a lot of startups have done in the past. You have to sometimes run on steroids, right? And that means adding a lot of fluff in the system, and then when quote unquote funding winter comes, you kind of go back and cut those additional fluff in the system. So coming to the last part of your question, which is a transition from a startup VC or PE funded company to a large part of a large enterprise or a global enterprise. I think it happened with us at the right time, I would say, because we were bought over by REA just before 2021, in the middle of COVID. Not a great outcome sometime, but when you look at all these things happening, we are sitting in a very comfortable position. So our seat belts were very, very tight. We were not running on steroids. Even in 2021, we were watchful. We were investing in the right pockets, but at the same time, growing at a very rapid pace. So I think that sometime is right at the growth stage where we are, but may not be right for an early stage startup where you have to be very, very innovative and have to take certain decisions at a very fast pace, and learn and unlearn few things. So that's what I would say from a transition perspective. And the other thing is a lot more learning on the governance side. We've seen quite a few stories in the last 1.5 years where startups are coming in the limelight because of governance. I think we all need to collectively solve for that, because that puts us in a very tricky situation and loses the investor confidence.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke of very interesting aspects, Vikas: growth versus utilizing cash, careful investing. And on that, I'll pick on governance for a brief bit after this round, but I want to just get in Pankaj, Vivek, and Ramesh to sort of let us know what their thoughts have been on this whole balance between growth to cash preservation. Ramesh, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. Hey, I'll share from a CFO perspective, right, in terms of what the priority should be. From being a hustler to plan it a bit, right? Have a how list in place, right? And see what are the initiatives. There will always be a stretch in those 30, 40, 50%, but without having a how list, there's no going anywhere, right? So having that depth of the working style. And the second thing is customer understanding. Even finance folks have to have a much larger, deeper understanding of customer, why, what pain points we are solving. So have that founder mindset coming into finance as well. So the second and next thing is governance. Nothing beats that, right? I think good governance, conflict of interest policies, not getting hassled on the pressure, right? So having that CFO taking that hat and being the mirror to the founder or anybody, right, for that matter, and championing that cause. I think governance, nothing can shortchange that. That is next. And from a cash perspective, it's extremely important. Not only look at percentage margins and those things, but look at unit economics far more deeply. Look at FCFF far more deeply, right? So I think then that's the next one. These are two things which comes to my mind from a CFO lens. And the last thing is have the right talent come in your organization. I think with all the layoffs, there's so much, I can tell you, there's so much demand for the best talent. The right talent in terms of hard work, it's significant amount of demand still in the market. So build a team, groom the team, and have the right team and the talent in your organization, building on this foundational aspects. And top of it, have that growth mindset to innovate and grow, right? That's what differentiates between a normal company to a startup phase. So this should be the top focus on the CFO side. I think if you do all these recipes consistently, demonstrate them over a period of time, the investments, I don't think should be a challenge. It should be more an outcome.
No, fair point. Pankaj, Vivek, do you want to sort of chime in?
So, yeah, all the points are quite pertinent, and uh, especially on the unit economics and all. These are often top points, and of course, any business has to be self-sustainable. One thing which I personally feel is very much held against startups, especially tech-based startups, is if you compare it with any other manufacturing company, right? Everyone tends to believe that it has a station, and therefore there is certain investment which goes into its fixed assets etc., which is only appropriated over a period of time in the profit and loss account, and therefore the P&L account to that extent is not impacted, right? Whereas in the case of technology based startups, the major investment which goes into is in the building of the backend, right? Building of their apps, building of their customer side apps and vendor side apps, whatever, right? If you're a platform or if you're a SaaS based platform, whatever. But then, the way that the accounting standards and, guidelines are structured, and therefore the way that the tax authorities also judge you, everything goes into the P&L in the same year, which therefore, leads to the perception that there is only hardly, 1 crore of revenue and 100 crore of loss, or whatever that, ratio could be, right? 1 crore of revenue, 10 crores of loss or whatever. But then compare that scenario with the manufacturing company and you realize that whatever revenue is there, but the losses are not as significant because even the interest during construction period is allowed to be capitalized, right? Which is very unfair to see with, the guys, they are not getting any debt financing, right? Only establishments get. Whereas vis-a-vis, in a manufacturing company, if you have a good, market or whatever, right? Good product. And if you have, shown some kind of a past performance of putting up a new project, you'll get that kind of financing. So from that perspective, I think that startups are also looked at from a very, very harsh set of lens, right? Which, pushes, and I'm nowhere defending that, you could slip through, you could slip through any of the governance matters or something. But then overall, there is a lot of pressure from all sides, right? Everyone is judging you. People who have not been part of the startup ecosystem, they are at times, passing comments that, okay, no, you guys don't worry about profitability, right? All that you care about is valuation, various stuff. So I think this awareness, even within the larger community, needs to be there, and also at some point of time, this equality of judging the profitability of startups and industry at large should be there, right? There should be a concept of some gestation period, right, and how the overall expenses are depreciated over a longer period of time. Else you'll keep on judging the startups as loss makers. And of course, unit economics and all do matter, but then should start performing the first 3 years. I mean, there are infrastructure projects which do not perform for 10 years, right? So how do you compare? Yeah, so that was my limited.
Sure. No, quite interesting, and some of it, we've heard, so we resonate. But Vivek, just before you come in, I know Ramesh had to sort of drop off at, in a minute or so. So Ramesh, I don't know if you can just hear us, to just quickly get you back on any closing remarks, and then we'll let you go. Thank you for your time. I know, sort of you've been stretched for other meetings as well. Any closing remarks, Ramesh?
Thanks. So overall, the effects of startups have been fundamentally taken care of. There's a lot of seeds which have been put in place, for example, AI or agri-tech and those things. There are few pieces which still needs to be developed, hoping and as Vikas said, how do we have a seat on table with the government on a regular basis? I think that's where it is, and maybe G20 for VDA specifically is another opportunity. So quite positive from that perspective, looking forward. And thanks for having me on this session.
Thanks, Ramesh. Thanks for joining us. With that, I'll let you go. And thank you again for being with us today. Vivek, sort of just very quickly bringing you back in to what Pankaj was mentioning in terms of startup profitabilities, etc. Any quick reactions on that, Vivek?
This panel has summarized most of the points. I just have to add 2 points, very simple. One is being frugal from the beginning is something needs to be as a culture has to be followed. That's the way we can grow as such. And second thing, taking 2021 and 22 as it's a significant investment went into the experiments. There should be a right check on how much of investment should go into the experiments. Unchecked will lead to a lot of other aspects. So that's something we as a CFO community or as a finance community need to have a focus on that. So these are the 2 points as such.
Sure. I think on that note, like we've also sort of just about the time to end our webinar discussion. And from what I heard from all of you, quite a few interesting topics, from governance, cash preservation, focus on growth, having a permanent seat on regulatory policy discussions with the government. I think it in some way it sort of leads you to what 2023 will focus on. And like Ranjit said, and most of us tend to agree, if the worst is behind us and the focus is now back to fundamentals, with companies having good core fundamentals, we should see funding to sort of and the whole capital deployment to sort of pick pace in this year. Having said that, gentlemen, thank you for being here. And I will sort of get quick closing reactions from each of you before we sort of wrap up this webinar. So, any closing reactions, Vikas? You want to go first?
Sure, Ritesh. I think quick closing remarks. While things are very, very uncertain right now, whether we look at what's happening in the startup ecosystem or around the globe, but everything is not gloomy doomy. We are still are the fastest growing economy. I think once we have 2024 election, things will be much more on a strong footing there onwards. So 2023 will going to be a little bit uncertain.
Great. Ranjit, do you want to comment on this, on the closing reaction?
Yeah, Ritesh, so I think, we always sort of try to blame external situations more, right? And I think, probably our endeavor, and we'll expect others too, will be to kind of try and do what's in our best capabilities to sort of perform, execute, and build on what we have. I think external circumstances come and go. Sometimes they're bright, sometimes they're gloomy. But as long as we, all operate with a strong fundamental core, I think things should be good.
Great. Vivek, you want to add in on that?
So focusing on tier 2, tier 3, or other tiers of cities to focus on the growth, that's something will be the case. And as Ranjit mentioned, focusing on the fundamentals is what I would also recommend.
Sure. Amit, your reactions on this, the closing notes?
Yeah, I think the big event is out of our way, so we can focus on other things.
Calm karo. That's what Amit is telling us.
Overall, see, every budget will come. There will be something to talk about, but then you are back to normal. The only good part from the budget is ultimately, or not budget rather. I think overall, if you see 12-month or last 12 months, the entire interest rate hiking scenario, the way we have managed as a country is much better than what we have seen across the globe, right? So we are isolated, and I think a lot of changes in the budget are also going to that direction. So create your own spending, spend for yourself. Don't go for foreign trips, otherwise you will be charged 20% extra advance tax. So travel in India. So I think everything is hinting toward giving boost to the local economy, and that'll play out. Yeah.
Sure. Dilip, Pankaj, your closing reactions, please.
Yep. Thanks, Ritesh, for this. And I think network brings business, and I had the opportunity to network at the Startup 22 Meet. And two things very strikingly: the government is doing a lot of things for the ecosystem, and this is not only announced in the budget; they do it all around. Like I said, the CGT MSME scheme only for startups. The Atal mission has actually disbursed 3,000 crores already to incubators, accelerators across the country. And most of the government incubators and accelerators have specific accelerators for, say, biotech and health tech and all those spaces. We have SIDBI who's already disbursed 8,000 crores of the 10,000 fund of funds that they had to most of the VCs. And in fact, some of the VCs that we work very closely with have been beneficiaries of that. So a lot of work the government is doing to promote the ecosystem. If you have a sound business idea, I think innovation never fails, and that's what the last couple of years have shown us. So it's not all gloom and doom, and I think budget, as Amit said, budget is just an event. There are a lot of things that keep happening, and you just have to continue to be positive about it.
No, quite a reassuring statement that you said. Innovation never fails. That's sort of been the essence of time with our in our experience also. Pankaj, closing reactions.
Echoing the same thoughts. The government's job is to create an environment and ecosystem, right? And we have to perform, right? So innovation never fails, of course, right? You can't challenge that. Yeah.
True.
Thank you for having me. Yep.
No, thank you. On that note, thank you, gentlemen, taking out time from a busy week on a Friday morning. I know it must not have been very easy for all of you. Thank you for joining in on this discussion, and thank you to all the participants who've joined us on this webinar. Between the first and the Amrit Kal and last for her government until 2024, I think the budget lies just in between that, and quite a lot of positivity and hope that it has brought in. Of course, some of us coming closely from the tax world will want to sort of complain that there could have been a little bit more, but that I suppose, like how some of my panelists started by saying, is the human nature of wanting more when there's something kept on the table. But looks like overall in the right direction, and we hope we sort of sail through 2023 with a lot more peace than we sort of sailed through 2022, the last 2 quarters of it. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful having you all. Hope to see you all soon. Thank you.